Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session sponsored by Qlik. What we're looking to cover today is how Qlik are helping organizations decouple your legacy on-premise data and bring it into an operationalized lakehouse. So my name is Ted Orme. I head up the data integration strategy here within Qlik, and I'm also joined by my colleague Jordan. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks, Ted. My name is Jordan Martz. I'm a principal solutions architect for Qlik.
So what we're going to cover today is a couple of two parts in a head-to-head. I'm going to go first and give a little bit of an overview of Qlik and how we're helping organization and the vision of bringing their data into their modern platforms today, and look at some of the trends and themes that we see in the market and how we're bringing that together into one unified platform, but helping our customers today. And then I'm going to hand over to Jordan, who's going to do a look at more detail about a specific customer example, and then look at the technology and show that in more detail. Jordan, do you want to give a brief summary of what you're going to be showing on today?
Yes, we have a customer that's in the trucking space, an incredible use case around how they've taken their mainframe and optimized that source. And as we talk about the different sources and targets that we have transformed, how we can then integrate to tools like Databricks or Spark-based data lakes is one of our key tenets to some of our success stories. This success story in particular was unique, and how that level of automation has been able to take, I think it was about 3 months in totality to success. That was incredible. And the overall experience of a platform to support that was another part of that story. So Ted, why don't we get started and we'll keep going. Perfect.
No worries. So just a little bit of housekeeping on our side of what we're showing here today, and really I'd like to look in a bit more detail then about who Qlik are and why we are and what we're helping organizations today. So Qlik have been around and have a large number of customers and global partners delivering on our solutions and offerings today. We've been recognized as an industry leader by Gartner for many years, both in the analytics and the data integration space, and really driving our innovation of our solutions today, helping our customers around data and all components of that. And really, you may be aware of Qlik as just being a visualization and analytics tool, but really through Qlik bought and the acquisition of Attunity last year and many other components in the data integration space to bring together these pillars of the organization. So what is it that we do and how we help organizations? And how we help them is all around the challenge around data. The organizations struggle really to take what we call this actionable data and drive insight into that. And the different silos of data that organizations have can often make it difficult for business decision makers to feel as though they've got the right data to make those decisions that they need. And maybe often the analytics platforms are not really part of their day-to-day business. And really this is where we can embed analytics, embed the right analytics into the business decision-making. So here we are bringing this data together. How we're helping organizations is bringing these three components together. These three components are where data integration, data analytics, and data literacy, turning business value into that data. So and how do we do this? How do we do this? We do this by closing gaps, by bringing raw data and bringing that and making it available, freeing the data that is locked within silos of data. Freeing data is only half the story. Then we need to be able to use that data, find that data before gaining insight into that data, understanding the data before then actually the data is then what we call through data literacy is being able to have a conversation, being able to have an argument with that data to gain insight into it. So data integration, data analytics, and data literacy together, bringing all of that together. And what we call this and the drive that is often the phrase around digital decoupling. Digital decoupling is a great phrase in that it separates out your legacy platforms, separates out those systems that run the business today to the modern platforms that need access to that data. And really, it all starts then with a simple building block called CDC, standing for Change Data Capture. And this is why Gartner has called us out as being the leaders of CDC, the leaders of independent CDC, because CDC unlocks your SAP systems, unlocks your mainframe systems, your Oracle, your SQL, your most valuable data that you have today. It unlocks that data through the mechanism of real-time capture of those legacy platforms, to bring it into the modern analytics platforms that you're building today, to drive that action, to drive that insight into the data that you have. And here we see three main trends that we see in the industry that are driving the adoption of these newer analytics platforms. The first one is around cloud application development. And really this has been ongoing for many years. But really it's about here whether or not you've got you're a bank and you've got your main application locked within a mainframe, but you want to be able to build cloud-based applications so that you and I and everybody today has banking applications on their mobile phone. And you want to be able to access real-time data to understand, have I been paid today? Can I pay this bill? Can I run this? The open banking platforms that have been driving digital transformation for many years relies upon having real-time data out of that legacy on-premise platform. We see this also in the drive with SAP. SAP is holding the most valuable data that organizations have, but you need to be able to build modern-based applications on that data in cloud infrastructure. Second big trend that we see is around the rise of the cloud data warehouse, and again this methodology often around failing fast, around being more agile, and about driving different types of business applications on the data that the traditional on-premise data warehouses just couldn't solve. Traditional on-premise ETL batch loading that was there to solve a single business use case wasn't really agile enough to meet the modern cloud analytics that people are looking today, to just consume the data that they need to answer those business questions faster. And again, real-time data out of your operational system into these modern cloud applications is critical to drive the value that these platforms are being built today.
Ted, do you mind if I hop in here and maybe add some key components here that I hear? You often hear with the data warehouse modernization, there's some components of the streaming that is associated to terms like microservices and also continuous integration and continuous development. And as those schemas and the sources change, or as the systems of the code change, automation is incredible to continually integrate and deploy that. And that's a key consideration here. I want to pass it back to you, Ted, but I thought maybe thinking about how that is an incredibly powerful component of that only enhances the partnerships with like Qlik, for instance, and component vendors like Databricks with their Lakehouse technologies.
Exactly that. And this is where just delivering the data isn't enough. You need to be able to deliver the data in a usable format based on the platforms that people are building today. And this is where, again, traditional ETL tools often just batched up and landed data, but it wasn't usable for the people building it. And even more so in what we call these next generation sort of data lakes as a service. And really all three of these environments are driven by the adoptions of cloud, driven by the adoptions of scalability that cloud can give organizations today. And these modern cloud-based data lake environments are traditionally, there's a file-based system underneath that. But again, just delivering a file and delivering a file, landing a file, you can quickly get a swamp in these environments. But actually by bringing the data, making it usable, making that real-time data, but then usable to the business, without whatever that use case may be, is where we're seeing a lot of innovation today. But really these three main use cases, we see blending as well. What I mean by that is, what is your most valuable data within an organization. You know that that mainframe data or that SAP data, that ERP or CRM data itself is critical. And you don't want to then just build another silo of data. You don't want to build just another silo of another use case so that they'll answer just a single use case. You want to be able to bring that data to answer multiple use cases, make data as a service across platforms. As such, bringing together these three main trends, these three main use cases is where we see organizations working today, because they don't want to have just creating another silo for an individual use case, but they know what the data is that they want. And that is exactly where Qlik Data Integration is bringing the data using CDC, change data capture, capturing the data out of their Oracle and their SQL and their DB2 and their mainframes and their SAP, and unlocking that and bringing it into the use case. So streaming data in real time out of operational systems, and then making it usable based on the platforms that they're building today. Streaming data, warehousing, all lakes, but we're seeing the combination of this on multiple clouds or any cloud before then driving analytics above that, finding the data, using the data with Qlik Catalog before gaining insight in the analytics across that. So this is the platform. This is how we're helping organizations. But truly, and the integration where we see with working with partners like Databricks that own the infrastructure and the platform itself, where we can stream that data and land that today. So the combination of these three pillars, this really is where our customers are going to that next level, bringing together both data integration, data analytics, and then their data literacy, being able to have that conversation, being argue with the data, embed the data into the business process that organizations are running today, freeing, finding, understanding, and taking action upon their data. This really is the uniqueness that Qlik have to offer today. And really, that's really where the bottom line of that the nice quote, working with IDC, those organizations that can get the benefit of the value of bringing this together, and understanding the integration of both streaming real-time data and the power of Qlik Analytics together, the ones that are going to be driving more value in their organizations today. So that was an overview of a little bit about Qlik, about how we're helping and how the integration, the trends that we see organizations choosing the best of breed products to help them on their journey to cloud, to help them on their journey to get value out of Spark and Databricks today. And really, this is where I'd like to pass on to Jordan to show you and give you an understanding of how this is being used in real life, do a deep dive into a customer that's a shared customer of ours today, and then look at the products so you can actually see and feel and understand the benefits of how we're helping organizations today. So Jordan, over to you.
Thanks, Ted. When you think about transformations, and JB Hunt was due for a transformation, they're one of the largest trucking industry partners in the entire North American continent. When you think about how product gets shipped and managed, there's real-time requirements around the shipping location, locale, the partners and the products that need to be sourced from different locations and brought together across the supply line, and also the communication of maintaining the maintenance of that system. And that system not only is logging individual trucks and how to maintain those trucks, but infrastructure across rail and air and the trucks themselves in an ecosystem that spans thousands of kilometers. When you're looking at the overall ecosystem of JB Hunt, there's a focus from their side of those operational concerns. So they took 3 of our partners. They took, JB Hunt partnered with Qlik, they partnered with Databricks, and they partnered with Microsoft in this use case. They had a number of different databases. One specifically was the legacy platform of their mainframe that has been running their business for a very long time. Those operational systems, when you look at those, they usually had a nightly operation that then would drive activity. That nightly reload cycle then became part of the process of accumulating what would be a standard data warehousing and legacy data warehouse environment. The operational intelligence that comes from this type of scenario was that they ended up having an insights team that was focused really about prediction, not around insight of alerting on actions that were real-time from the data. There's aspects of the real-time infrastructure that are enabled through a tool like Qlik Replicate. But when you're supporting this bolted-on reporting, some of the time-intensive tasks have requirements, and that results may not always be accurate or relevant. So the restrictions of the technologies were based around the compute time, often, the sourcing of the data, and often manual changes that then change the behavior of the overall system. So what happened was the leadership came to a realization that now that the tools are available, we have 6 key components along the supply line that we need to consider in our overall vision. For one, a lot of EDI created some of the visibility and lack of visibility that needed to be addressed. Sourcing that from the mainframe, gaining that insight into real time, and using just data science immediately started a value chain that grew the organization's needs and requirements over time. As you look at the insights of each one of the assets that were then directed, as you were looking at, well, shipment requirements or location requirements, telemetry along that supply chain became not only data science enabled, but also integrated into applications. Now analytics are becoming the actionable changes that they're using to then build their business for the 21st century and beyond. JB Hunt's been around, I think, over 100 years at least. And as those businesses transform, many of the different suppliers, shipping components across the world's supply chains are changing. Even in the changing world that we've had, this challenges of this year, supply chains have had to continue. And that manageability of what is important, not just the supply line physically, but the data supply line and how these four components that you're going to see today become very relevant for their overall experience. When you think about ingestion flexibility, the types of data that come from the different sources are paramount. The repositories that they write into need to be cost effective. But if those systems change, the streaming requirements, as Ted noted, the overall warehouse needs to be, or the data lake, the lake house, the warehousing, all of those type of changes that are part of that cloud transformation, warehouse transformation, and then data lake transformation. That's where the automation is required for managing the loads. And as you monitor for those changes and you monitor for that overall system, let's go to an architectural diagram and talk about what moved and how it operated. There were certain structures of how the location for shipped materials lived and where they lived. You had cloud-hosted applications in SQL Server, you had on-prem SQL servers, and you had the mainframe. Replicate unlocked it, supporting that data science ecosystem, and partnered with Databricks both from a structured streaming, one of the core requirements, to building a real-time and continuously updated scenario that then combined resources from Synapse and into Databricks to then be able to then service models that they can consume as applications, then to also service their analytics team. The requirements and security that they had in the mainframe had to be replicated. That was a part of that system. That was enabled through Microsoft's powerful cloud-enabled components. Further, then Databricks enabled the overall transition of streaming data and gave them the scoring that they needed to change their overall pattern and evolve.
I think, Jordan, this is the part also that there's just that fundamental value around what decoupling is all around. Because the DB2, the mainframe, the production systems are locked in. They may have their own life cycle. There may be a 2, 5, 10-year plan for migrating and or moving on in those platforms today. But the value of that data in those modern platforms is critical. And understanding the why and what people are doing and building out those applications really does highlight that architectural slide of the value of bringing real-time data out of production and building up an ecosystem around Databricks to prove value.
I just love how you mark that, because when we talk about storing and processing and maintaining the management of that over time, it's not as easy as it looks. And it's being able to have that automation that becomes really paramount. I think you nailed these 4 points. And I think that's what's important next as we look at the complexity. When you talk about complexity, the first thing you do when you solve any problem is you break it down into smaller pieces, right? Decoupling. And your highlighted components that you had, Ted, were these 3 components. You talk about catalog, the Qlik Analytics platform, and the QDA platform. All of that works together. JB Hunt was focused around this classic slide you've seen from Google, the amount of infrastructure it takes to put together a data lake. When you think about the data collection, that's a big aspect of it. You think about machine resource management, Databricks is a big part of that. The process and automation, there's lots of that. That was one of the key tenets that Ted talked about, was warehouse automation, was system automation. So Spark gives you analysis, it gives you feature management, it gives you verification. But between the Qlik components, the Databricks components, the Microsoft infrastructure monitoring and overall, and then getting to machine learning, it took quite a bit to bring that together. The Qlik data integration platform, and Ted, I'll definitely ask for you to chime in here. When we are loading this overall ecosystem, this is what we call our core pillar slide, talking about those key components and servicing the consumption from all of the partners that Qlik works with, and also the other partners on the machine learning side, as well as the data science.
It really does. This one slide does tell the whole story very much about Qlik data integration. In that on the left-hand side, there is the operational systems that are running the organizations, running JB Hunt, whether they're banking or finance or insurance, or whether they may be Oracle, SQL, DB2, the mainframe, SAP, and unlocking that data, but then delivering it based on the use case. We can read once and write many. So if you're building out applications in streaming in Kafka, we'll stream that data to those environments. You're building out modern warehousing on Snowflake or Synapse or Google and the like, we can land that and make that data usable. Or in the managed data lake environments, whether or not that then with Databricks or S3 or ADLS and the like, the storage devices, we will land that data and make that usable. It's critical then to understand that use case. So understanding the drivers here of what are we trying to achieve. Again, repeat that once. We're not looking to then just create another single silo of data to answer one line of business. Those days are gone. You want to be able to have that data usable and findable. And that's where the catalog sits, because the catalog can make the business find the right data for that use case. And what is right for one use case is going to be right for another. So being able to reuse that data for multiple business lines. And that's where the analytics, AI, machine learning, data science can all consume that data. And this is the end-to-end flow that really has highlighted well the overall independence of the platform, in that data is an asset. That asset can be consumed by multiple business units within the organization.
Awesome, Ted. Let's go show them how it works. In this sequence, what we're going to discuss are the change data capture components that Replicate provides, thinking about the batch, initial load, the change data capture, and the change of the DDL. When you're going to store this, you want to be able to automatically merge into Delta, transform that Delta, and create a real-time operational data store. That data store can then be used within a Databricks notebook to build Spark ML and MLflow integrations, where we then can render them back through Qlik Sense. What this product does is it takes in the ingestion, whether it's a real-time stream or the bulk load, but it takes it into the bronze layer of Delta tables, both notifying the actual files, the tables, and the metadata associated DBFS, and as well merging into that component. In this section, we're going to be talking about how to create a connection to Databricks. We're going to be loading into ADLS, and we're also be hooking into the Metastore. As we configure that operation, we're going to then work within the Replicate console, as you can see here. The Replicate console will start with a new task, which we'll call Spark Summit EMEA. I'm going to incorporate some of the store changes functionality to carry all the histories of the transactions that have occurred prior. In that operation, we're going to configure some of the endpoints, such as this SQL server, but we can connect to a bunch of different platforms, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud. And we're then going to target the Delta component from our Replicate console and connect to it. So we bring over our two sources and targets, and what we're going to do is we're going to tune that both for the full load and optimize the loading functionality, as well as then the number of tables that we're going to pull from, some of them being smaller, so we're just going to extract them very quickly. I'm also going to incorporate some of the store changes functionality, which which is aware of the partitioning requirements on the system. As you bring these data sources over, now we're selecting multiple schemas and multiple sets of data. I can also adjust my columns as I need to, so such as maybe do some math functions, add first name, last name, or put in date times and impute some null records as you're going. What I'm going to do now is we're going to kick this off to do some bulk loading via Replicate. As we're loading these records, we're going to be loading about 7.8 million records in this operation. Let's get this started. We're going to click this Start Processing, which begins creating a loop of all the tables, 74 tables. We've loaded that into what we call the perf bronze schema that's inside Delta. And what we're going to do is we're going to bulk load all of these over. As you can see on the screen, there's a quite a few of the smaller ones in the thousands and a couple hundred records in each table, often lookup tables or dimension tables in the data warehouse. But as we're loading these operations, what you're going to see is we're going to start to hit in the millions of records, such as the fact and sales information records. What you see right here, you've got sales order enlarged with about 4.8 million. Another one on order header, which is about 2.2 million. And these bulk loads are really bringing over a lot of records. And you're seeing 2,000 records a second, and it's moving across. As we process this operation, most of the data comes over in a compressed format. Those are the two components of a replicate task. There's the integration to the source database and how it's part of the native database. And then there's also the in-memory task of transferring the data in a compressed and an encrypted format. Some of this data, as it's almost completely finished now, will be both mapped for common data types between two systems, as well as then the handling of the batch and the generation of the types of code native to bulk copy, often like the BC bulk copy command. And as we're almost done with this one, I think this is sales order header, and it completes, we're going to discuss creating a replication task. Now that we've got all that over, and that lasted all of about 5 minutes, we're going to go into part 3, which talks about capturing, merging, and managing those real-time changes. As we capture and manage these, what we're going to be looking at is the deletion of millions of records that you can see right here. Secondarily, we're also going to run a bunch of inserts. I think like at one of the tables I put 1 million, another one 100,000. And in this utility, we're going to kick off and manage both multiple tables that are listening for inserts, updates, and deletes, CRUD operations. When it's running these operations, what replicate does is it becomes a native deployment of the source system. For instance, we're hooking into a SQL Server, so it's using its own inherent ability to understand the SQL engine. None of the replication APIs, but a very core integration to the SQL Server engine. They have like binary log reader, which is one of the key components of reading the Oracle database, or certain messages inside of a mainframe. But this listening component then gives you that really powerful extractor. And when we're generating a bunch of the code and extraction components, you're seeing millions of rows of truncation. It already captured what was in memory, so now it's cached the change records into disk so that it's read them out of the database and put them into the transfer cache of the replicate engine with the command criteria that it will then generate when it loads into the target delta. What we're looking at now is the optimizations. Like you can see that the cluster's moving along really, really well. And I'm going to go into the database and I'm going to run a count. And I've got 4.8 million records in there. Or I go to the address and I can show that we've collected sample data from those records. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'd love to hear your stories on how you're doing your digital transformation and decoupling your data.